Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the channel we are taking a look at Substratum Protocol, Descend, Learn, Survive. This is a game that I took a very brief look at in my last kind of show and tell video of some of the new things I had purchased. And today we will be doing more of a deep dive, more of a detailed review of Substratum Protocol. So this is from Pandian Games, and I bought the game directly from their website. It is still available with the physical journal and everything that you will need. And this is a game created by Andrew Boyd. And this is a game all about, it's an RPG. It can be played solo or with a traditional GM-led campaign. But this is a game where you are playing as a scientist or a group of scientists, and you are descending deep into the recesses of the earth to try to discover the hows, the whys, this anomaly, this anomalous thing that has appeared deep within the bowels of the earth, and it is causing havoc. It is causing land masses to implode and to dissolve, and you need to figure out what's going on with this anomaly before it is too late. So this says that subsurface analysis complete. Ground shocks detect in all sectors. Subsurface fractures spreading. Gravitational fluctuations, error. All sensors reading at 0.7 G, error. Solar orbit deteriorating. Lunar orbit elongating at accelerated rate. Electromagnetic field failure. Take shelter, take shelter, take shelter. So this is the Solo Plus Apocalyptic Mystery Tabletop RPG. When an anomaly appeared at the Earth's core, the Substratum Protocol was initiated, and scientists were rushed at all costs to the hastily built Fracture Observatory. You are the best and brightest scientists we have. You are the Substratum Expedition team. So really cool theme. I like this. I've been enjoying playing games that are kind of outside of my maybe more fantasy or pulp science fiction wheelhouse, and this is pretty cool. So to play the game solo, you of course need the book or PDF. You will need your personnel folio, so this is where you keep track of your character. You will need your team folio. This is the team of the other scientists that are helping you when you play solo. If you're playing with a group, each one of you will play as a scientist. And then you probably won't need your mission control folio. This is mainly for the GM, but you might find some use for this. You will also need possibly some journal or some way to keep track of some of the things, because you do want to keep some notes, kind of like a field journal, and the field journal notes, depending on what you have discovered, the kind of flora and fauna and weird anomalies and weird situations that you've discovered, those will help you drive the narrative and push the narrative forward. So you do want to keep track of those. You will need a full set of polyhedral dice, a deck of cards shuffled, and I have been using this roll and play sci-fi toolkit to kind of augment some of the random encounters. One of my main issues with this game is I don't think there are enough random encounters, especially when you come up to a thing called the complication. And at certain points in the game, the GM is supposed to introduce a complication if things aren't going exactly to the plans of the scientists. And they kind of lack some of the complications or ways to generate them. So I've been using some of the encounters in roll and play to help augment and to help solve that issue. So that's pretty typical. A lot of these little kind of indie RPGs don't always come with everything. And so we can always turn to our other tools that we already own to help facilitate that play. And I have taken a very detailed look and review of Roll and Play Sci-Fi Toolkit, so just search for that if you want. These are really handy, especially the science fiction version. So let's talk a little bit about Substratum Protocol here. I think the book is really well laid out. It's very clean. The kind of page layout and the look does remind me a lot of Eco-Mofos, and I like this kind of clean look. I think it's very well organized. At the beginning here, we have our quick reference. We have our welcome page, and I like how there are bits and pieces of lore and story and world building scattered throughout in the shape of these documents. And a lot of times you can kind of go back in and read through the rules and find these little things, and those can help you when you need to make some kind of decision, some kind of narrative decision. We have some little ideas here for the GM, for the mission control, and the scientist, kind of defining their roles and what to expect out of each one of those positions while you are playing. So we have an expedition planning, we have our session planning, traveling montages, NPCs and creatures, and the otherworldly. There is some combat, but you guys, it's not a pulp. You're not, what does it say? You're not grizzled soldiers. So combat should mostly be avoided, but sometimes you will have to get into some scrapes. I think this game does play pretty well as a one-shot. There is a way to kind of accelerate the play, especially when you're playing solo. And one of the things that I like about this is that this game has a definitive end goal. So we do have an end game trigger. There is something we are working towards, and that's discovering that anomaly. So this says that Substratum protocol has a definite end goal. While players can back out of the anomaly sector without triggering the end game, the moment they make the last hypothesis, the final montage begins and the gameplay shifts to that end game. So this isn't one of those RPGs where you will have a campaign that goes on and on and on. I think you could play an entire game in a day, especially if you use some of the accelerated rules. And with the group, you could probably do maybe 2 or 3 sessions. Another thing that I appreciate is that even though you might think this is a game of survival because you are descending into the earth, going through these different sectors, avoiding dangers and making discoveries, it's not really a game of survival in terms of survival mechanisms. Your characters always have the things they need. They have an inflatable pressurized habitat, a beep bobop recon droid that can help them do recon. They have all of their climbing gear and flares and rations. So you aren't keeping track of that in terms of surviving. The survival is more in terms of narrative and more in terms of what you are discovering. So then we get into character creation, and character creation is pretty straightforward. Each character has 6 different skills. We have make, break, dash, evade, think, and sway. And when you create a character, you will assign a D10, a D8, and a D6 to 3 of those skills, and the rest of those skills will have a D4. So here's my character here. My lead scientist, he is my lead of the expedition force. He is Dr. Prefab Dimbo, and he is a zoologist. And so we have a scientific specialty here, a D20 roll that you can create your specialty with. We have a survival specialist, an engineer, zoologist, a xenobiologist, a linguist, a thermologist, physicist, radiologist, and so on. So lots of different ways to play your scientist. And for my character, I chose to put a D8 in make. I chose to put a D10 in think and a D6 in sway. So the rest of your character's chart here, your character sheet will have their storage unit. They can hold up to 3 items. Now, narrative items, they don't take up space. The items in your storage unit, those can help you overcome challenges. So I have a Pathfinder tool, and my Pathfinder tool has a roll of a D10. These rolls, they will go down as you use your skills, as you use your equipment. It's kind of a usage dice system, and you will bump those down 1 value down to a D4. You can play rules where you go all the way down to a D2, but usually the lowest is a D4. And then you can take actions to rest and to heal in order to bounce those back up to their starting values. Now, one of the things I really love about this game is the conflict resolution. So we have a number of different actions that we can take. We can confront, convince, study, avoid, travel, understand, and prepare. Each one of those is associated with a certain skill. So for instance, if we wanted to study something for an insight or a clue, we would use our think and any other skill. when you use your skills, those will be dropped down to the lower value of your die after you have handled the conflict resolution. But conflict resolution is determined by a deck of cards. So anytime you are doing something, so if we were trying to understand something, we had found some kind of anomalous object and we wanted to know how it was tied to the anomaly, we draw 2 cards. And then we flip those over and we take a look at their values. So a 6 and a 4. Okay, so we were trying to understand. So understanding would be think plus any other skill. Okay, so my think is a D10. So I'll take my D10 for think. And now I need to pick one other skill. And you roll those dice and then you compare them individually to the totals on the cards. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and sway. So charm and manipulate, intimidate. I'm trying to manipulate. I'm going to say that sway is a physical manipulation. I'm trying to manipulate this anomalous object while I am observing how it works to try to understand. So then I roll my 2, I have a D10 and a D6, and I have a 5 and a 5. Okay, so the 5 is higher than the 4, but I didn't roll anything over a 6. So because I beat the 4, I take that into my hand. The 6 gets discarded. If I had rolled a 7 and a 5, then I would have beaten both cards, and then I can take both of these cards into my hand. Now here's where the game gets really cool. The cards in your hand, you can spend to help yourself do cool things. And one of the cool things, or one of the many cool things you can spend your cards on, is using your Exosuit's systems. So all of the scientists are equipped with this Exosuit. And the Exosuit has been specifically designed for these kinds of expeditions. And they have all kinds of different features, and they have different things that you can spend your cards on. So you can spend your cards on repairing and healing, boosting your actions, boosting your die rolls when you take a skill action, sensory deployment, radio fracture, observatory. That's a way that you can communicate with the GM in a way that they will have to answer a question about what's going on. It's kind of a way for the players to push the narrative forward, but you can also do that solo. And one of the ways you can do that solo is by looking at your cards and then thinking of the deck of cards here as the GM, and then you're kind of testing. So I want to say that, I found something out about this anomalous object, and I am saying as the player that this anomalous object is going to point me into the direction. It's some kind of alien compass thing, and it's going to allow me to pass more quickly into the next area without having some kind of danger or confrontation. So I will play a 6 out of my hand, and then we flip this over, and oh, it's an 8. So no, that did not happen. But if the player's cards is a higher total, if the player's card is a higher total than the Game Master's card, then that thing happens. Super, super cool. I love that. Longtime viewers of the Dungeon Dive will know that I really like when players can earn a resource and then they can choose different ways to spend that resource to augment bad luck or to make cool things happen. It's a really great area where there's a strong sense of choice for the players to take over the game. And I think that does help with the solo play a lot as well. So in addition to your main scientist, when you are playing solo, you will also use a team of NPCs. And so my team of NPCs is Dr. Baldo, the anthropologist, Professor Stromby, the hydrologist, and Miss Cartwright, who is a xenobiologist. And she is Dr. Prefab Dimbo's assistant. And she is working towards her PhD under Professor Dr. Dimbo's tutelage. And for your NPCs, you can assign a D12, a D10, and a D8, and then all others start at a D6. And so when you're playing, you will choose to either use your main character for the stat rolls or somebody in your team. As your team members take stress and they take too much stress, they will die. and it might leave you alone, but again, you can try to heal. Now, one thing that I forgot to show is after I rolled those totals, then I would have to lower each one of those down to its next lower. So I used a think. So now my think would be at a D8, and I used sway. So D6 would drop down to a D4, and I'm playing where D4 is the lowest. And then I would have to take some kind of break in order to bump those back up to their totals. I think that's really cool. That's one of my favorite things. Actually, it is my favorite thing about this game is the conflict resolution, how you always do 2 skills. You always roll the die associated with that skill, and then you compare those to the cards. If you beat the cards, you take those into your hand. And then if you beat both, it's a high success. If you beat one, it's a medium success. And then the GM is supposed to introduce a complication. And this is where I think the game falls down a little bit, is it doesn't really talk anywhere in here about complications. And I wish that there were charts to roll up or kind of a procedure to generate complications more easily, especially for the solo player. And that's where I have started kind of turning to other resources that have other random charts to roll on to determine what those complications are. As the players are exploring the depths here, we have our different sectors, and you will be moving from one sector to the next, starting at the surface at the fracture opening at 0 kilometers and moving all the way down to the anomaly, which is at 5,700 kilometers deep into the earth, moving down one sector at a time. Each sector, as you move into it, has I believe every one is a D12 encounters, so you never really know what you're going to get. But then the book also says to use these as complications. And I wish that there were just separate complication procedures, especially for solo play. So at the fracture opening, at the beginning of your game, you are moving, you're starting to move down into the depths of the earth, and you might discover a sudden burst of steam and heat from underground vents, causing severe burns. Okay, so we would want to avoid this. So let's take a look here. We have avoid. That is evade and a skill. Okay, so we will take our evade die, which is a D4. Ooh, pretty low. Actually, let's have one of our team members do that. Let's have our team members evade. So they will take a D6, and they'll use a dash as well. So they'll use a D6 and a D6. Okay, so let's do 2 cards here. So that's a 1 and a 7. Okay, so we beat 1. We didn't beat the 7. We would take that into our hand. That was a partial success. So now we would have some kind of complication. The complication can be associated with that steam. Maybe one of our team members took some damage or took some stress, so I can mark that off. That would satisfy that need for stress. Now, at that point, I could have also used my lead scientist, and maybe they could have used the Pathfinder tool, which is at a D10. So this is an item that has a mechanical advantage, and any of those items that you roll up when you're creating your character here, we have a little chart of items. Those can be used as mechanical items, not just narrative items. I think that's really cool as well. To flesh out your character, you will answer 3 questions on these personnel questionnaire and a world building questionnaire. And so for an example here, Dr. Prefab Dimbo volunteered for the Substrata team after seeing footage of wondrous fauna. I believe that the Substratum expedition is too afraid of the anomaly's impact on humanity. Humanity doesn't have an inherent right to exist. That is something that Dr. Dimbo believes. If you were to take humanity out of the equation of creation, out of the equation of the ecology, things would just move on. And so he is not actually afraid of the anomaly, but he's curious about it. He became a zoologist after a strange encounter with an octopus. And let's see, his personal drive, he believes that the Substratum expedition forces are professional, but they lack a sense of awe. They lack a sense of wonderment about what's going on. And for the exosuit design, I said that there are a number of different noises and lights on the exosuit that can scare some wildlife. And so there is some kind of detriment, a drawback to having these exosuits. And I got interested in this expedition by discovering some fjord wranglers who were growing in abundance at the fixture's opening. So that's one last thing we'll take a look at here as far as something I really like, and that's the bestiary. And so we have a D20 bestiary, and these can also be rolled up as complications, so you can use these as complications. And we have different types of things, different types of weird creatures, different types of flora and fauna that you might discover. And these aren't just things to fight, you aren't just looking up in this bestiary to look for things that might have hit points and an armor class and how much damage they do. I don't think they list damage or anything at all. So what you're supposed to do with these is this is when you would turn to your expedition journal and you would update your field guide about the different creatures and the different things that you have discovered while you are playing. And then you kind of connect all of those dots as you move towards the inner core to the anomaly, along the way trying to find your clues. And as I mentioned in my quick preview of this game a while ago, the clues are printed upside down, and this is on purpose so you don't see them. You actually have to turn the book over. But we have different clues and different knowledge about the anomaly, and then you can use that as you enter the inner core to deal with the anomaly. And then once you do your final hypothesis, a thing happens, and then you look forward kind of 6 months to a year in the narrative of the world and kind of illustrate or narrate what has happened to the world, what has happened to your scientists, and what it means to coexist with the anomaly. Or maybe you've figured out a way to stop the anomaly, to put a stop to its destruction. And so overall, I think Substratum protocol is pretty cool. I wish there were more procedures on complications. I also wish there were more procedures on travel. It's kind of hard to know exactly when you should push forward to a new sector. And one of the ways to play solo is to play this simplified method where each sector you just have one encounter, maybe a complication, and then you move forward and you take a travel action. And so with playing that simplified kind of quick way, you can very quickly move through the game and get done in a single session. But as far as the traveling goes for the regular gameplay, there really aren't any procedures that will govern, how many encounters you should have, when should you push forward. I wish there was some kind of mechanism, like even a D6 roll where you're trying to hit a total on every encounter, you get to add 1, and if you roll a 6 or something like that, then you are moving forward. So I just wish there were better procedures for coming up with complications and better procedures for dictating travel and from moving from one sector to the next. But overall, I think Substratum protocol is pretty cool. It's very quick. It has a fantastic conflict resolution system. I love gaining those cards, and having the ability to spend those to do cool things is something I really, really love, and I would love to see more games use that system. So all right, you guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this review of Substratum protocol. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.